Okay, the live stream is started.
Hey, folks.
Hi, Toddy. Yeah, let's give 1 more minute. Let me share today's agenda. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Yeah, thank you. I think we can get started. I also saw people join. So today we are glad to have a team, SCARF team, Arjun and Avi, join us. A bit background about this. Actually, in last community meeting, Feynman shared the SCARF tool to the community, and it drew some interest. So today we have a SCARF team join the community meeting to share more about SCARF. Okay, I think over to you, SCARF team.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Arjun. I do some of the work with different users and customers here at Scarf.
And my name's Avi Press. I'm the founder and CEO of the company, but I have a background as an open source maintainer as well.
Thank you. I think we have many participants joined today, so I can give a quick introduction. So this is not a project community meeting, and we have a maintainers. I think currently most folks in this meeting are Notary project maintainers. So some focusing on the notation, the tooling, some focusing on the governance and other related work in the community. And we have this Monday meeting join together to discuss any issues, planning, and also collaboration in the community. Okay, I think Avi or Arjun, you can start with the SCARF introduction. Okay.
Cool. Go for it, Arjun.
Sure. Yeah. So just for some context, the goal of Scarf is to help open source projects get a better understanding of how their project is being used. Um, that comes in a variety of forms. So we have helped people track who is showing interest in their project, whether that's by virtue of visits to some of the web artifacts that they have, whether that's by tracking the downloads of that project. That could be, Docker containers, it could be binaries, it could be a variety of different things. Or it could be by helping them track the ongoing usage of their project, which can also be done in a variety of ways. We work with quite a lot of open source projects, many in the CNCF as well as some of the other big open source foundations like the Apache Software Foundation. We do have partnerships with both of those foundations. So I think something that we have really prioritized in the past is making sure that we are taking a very privacy conscious approach to helping to track usage and downloads and interest in open source projects. Yeah, as Avi mentioned, a lot of the folks in our team are either former or current open source maintainers. So, I think we really buy into the open source ethos, and our goal is to help make these usage metrics more useful for maintainers without jeopardizing, the privacy and security that open source developers expect and need. I guess before I go into some of these other notes here, I know that we had wanted to go through a demo, go through some case studies about other projects, as well as go through some Q&A, which Feynman had sent over some of the questions that folks had before. And maybe I'll just pause for a brief second and say, just given that high level description, are there any questions that come up or anything that I should go into before tackling some of these other items? Cool. Well, yeah, definitely feel free to jump in if that does come up. So I'm gonna try to share my screen here and I can try to go through a brief demo of how Scarf works. So first, I just wanted to go through a very high level overview of the different methods that Scarf uses to collect this data. Essentially, we can collect data in three different manners. So one is by helping to track the downloads of the software. This happens at the point of download. So essentially, what we do is act as a gateway where we basically redirect to the endpoint from which the software is typically downloaded. So an example of this would be, Notary could be downloaded using Docker Compose. It can be downloaded in a variety of different ways. And essentially, when somebody does that Docker Compose command, it's pulling from some endpoint that has a Docker container behind it. And we can basically sit in front of that Docker container and redirect to where that container is typically hosted. That's category number one of how we can help track open source usage is by tracking things at the point of download. Category number two is with a web pixel. This is a cookieless web pixel. So there's no JavaScript, no cookies. It's basically just an HTML image tag that people will typically put on their documentation, on their READMEs, even on places like their Docker Hub README to help track and understand how people are engaging with the software both before and after the download. And then the third category that we can help track is basically ingesting any access logs that you may have, whether those are version checks or things of that nature, or also setting up new telemetry within the open source project. And this one is probably the most customizable of them because it can really take the form of whatever you guys might want to track when it comes to the Notary project. And essentially what we do when we have these different categories of tracking is we can combine them all together and give you a sense of how are people engaging and showing interest in your project, and how does that interest, especially from a particular organization, fluctuate over time. One thing that's worth mentioning about all of these different methods is that we, by default, are GDPR compliant, and we do not store personally identifiable information on hand long term. So whenever we collect this data for you, we take the IP address, which is typically how we will be able to enrich further information about it. And then when we enrich the information, we then discard and destroy the IP address so that we're not holding on to any of that PII on hand long term. And definitely happy to answer more questions about that as we go into it. But I think it's just worth calling that out because that's a really key piece of how we do this and also how we make sure that we're kind of aligning ourselves with the open source community and privacy ethos. I guess any questions so far, or should I jump into the platform? Cool. So essentially, once you have data that is being tracked within Scarf, you can be tracking, your downloads, be tracking the views that you have on those different pages. And we'll start to break that down into a variety of different metric aggregations. So one thing that we'll do is for every download, for every view that comes, we'll be able to take that detail and narrow it down into the number of unique people who are actually engaging in those places, the number of unique people who are downloading. Many of the downloads that may come may be from CI pipelines or some type of automated process that makes it really difficult to discern what is going on behind this number. So our aim is to kind of break that down further for you and tell you, okay, it's actually this many people who are doing those downloads, or this many people who are doing those page views. We can also break that down in a variety of different ways. For example, by what operating system they're on, how that number is changing over time, what company they're from. I think this is something that folks will often find particularly interesting, is just to understand, which companies are the ones who are actually companies, organizations, universities, whatever it is, the ones that are actually engaging with the software, downloading things on a regular basis, and the ones that are really the most active users. We can also break things down by other items like what client they're using to download, if they're using some type of cloud provider, what cloud provider they're on, as well as where in the world they're located. We'll typically also provide details on what versions are being downloaded, as well as what pages those people are visiting when it comes to the web traffic. Yeah, I guess that's a very high level overview. I can dig a little bit more into things like, for example, some of the company details that we can give you. I can dig more into some of the filters that we offer. I can also dig more into how we actually do the setup. But I do want to make sure that this is tailored towards what's most applicable and sort of like the questions that are most valuable for the time here. So maybe I'll just pause again there and open it up for some more questions if there are any.
I have one question. So I think there are other tools or pages sponsored by CNCF for show some statistic results for a different open source project. So what's the main difference that SCARF and also the value that the SCARF can provide it additionally?
Yeah. Are there any tools in
I
particular
can
that you're thinking of? I guess I'm curious.
LFX Insights maybe.
Yeah, I think CNCF has some uh
Yeah.
tool. I didn't remember correctly the name yet.
I can take this one. Yeah. So, yeah, all CNCF projects have access to the LFX Insights dashboards from the Linux Foundation. Um, these dashboards typically incorporate more contributor level data. So, like who's, opening issues and who's contributing code, these kinds of things. Scarf is very uniquely focused on the usage of the software itself. And so it's kind of a little bit of a different thing there. Arjun, if you go back to the homepage really quick, I think, one of the things that, Feynman and I were talking about early on was helping the Notary project understand better how many users the project actually has and how the user base is growing. And that's one thing that Scarf does here very, uniquely and specifically is that we can take, just because you have 1,000 Docker downloads today, it doesn't mean that they came from 1,000 different places. And that's the kind of thing that we can, really help provide visibility into, so you can actually see how the user base is increasing, not just like the total raw downloads that you're getting, because these are very different metrics in practice. Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah. One question in the chat, being a gateway, what's the way that a model we can share with users to verify software integrity? Um, this one, I guess, I'm sure the folks here in this community know better than anyone else, is that, you really, with any kind of registry, it's really good to distribute the signatures, the integrity of the file that you are downloading. And so, typically the folks that we work with, like, for instance, we work with the Falco project, a, graduated CNCF project around security, and, making sure that you are distributing, or somewhere in your project kind of having signatures that the user can verify against is a very good idea. And indeed, for Docker containers, you can enable, signature checking as well at the client level. And so, in the same way that, GHCR can be hacked, it's also true that Scarf could, is also just another vector here. It's not a fundamentally different vector, but in general, we always recommend, giving some kind of signatures that an end user can validate.
Yeah, it looks like
Todd?
Todd.
Yeah, thanks. I'm curious, how do you do the gateway implementation? Let's say, for example, we have downloads which are from the release tab on GitHub, what do we need to do in order for you to intercept actually those downloads? The same
Yeah.
with the gateway for downloading or pulling images, because normally the request goes directly to the registry. So what do we need to do in order to implement that?
Yeah, so in general, what happens here is that, if you're sending folks to say, Docker pull, I don't know if the name for maybe it's a notary project /notary or something to this effect. We would make it so that you'd be able to essentially just embed, your own domain with this. You can either use, a domain that you guys want to use, or you can use one of ours. So it'd be, something to the effect of like notary.scarf.sh/image identifier. And so, updating things like your documentation, if you have Helm charts, if you have Docker Compose files, etc. Basically, like all the references that you are pointing users to, you can update to essentially point to your Scarf domain. Did I hear correctly that you wanted to know how the gateway was implemented in terms of how we built it?
No,
Or no? Oh, okay,
not,
got it.
not
Okay.
the gateway, how we should do that, right?
Yeah. So typically that's what we recommend is essentially updating all the references in your docs to how people download the containers, and then any kind of configurations from orchestration tools, you update those image references as well. And that tends to get most of the traffic. Of course, letting people go straight to Docker Hub is also, that makes us backwards compatible as well. So you can always introduce Scarf and you're not going to break anything from past users. And so it's kind of very much an intentional way that we recommend people do it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Should I just read the questions in the chat here and answer those? Or did anyone else have other questions that I can get to?
Hey, Avi,
Okay.
sorry for being late. Have
all
you
good.
already finished the show demo?
We're kind of, largely through it or in the middle if there's more that we want to show. But maybe I can just get to some of these questions, and if other folks want to see other things in the app, we can do that too. Whatever's most
Okay.
useful. Okay.
I mean, this QA can be studied after your demo if you didn't finish.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Arjun, was there more stuff you wanted to show here?
I mean, I think we've gone through sort of like the really high level demo of Scarf. I think if there are specific aspects of what we had talked about in the first few minutes of that demo that folks would be interested in us digging deeper into, for example, what we do for a particular company, or, how filtering works or that kind of thing, then definitely happy to go deeper into that. But also, want to make sure that this is useful for folks depending on what they're interested in. So I don't want to, over-index on a particular feature of ours if that's not, the most interesting part to you guys. But, happy to follow your direction here. Would it be helpful for me to talk more about some of this company information and the filter stuff?
Okay. Maybe I'll just answer some of these questions that are in chat here, and if we kind of come up on anything else that we want to explore, we can have the app up and show it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. How can we make sure the download process is secure? We talked about this a little bit, like, yeah, in general, distributing signatures of whatever artifacts you're putting out there is always a good idea, whether or not you use Scarf, but especially if you do. How can we guarantee availability of the Scarf proxy? If the Scarf proxy is unavailable for some time, will it block users from downloading the CLI from GitHub? So it's important to underline here that we're basically adding new ways to get to your artifacts. We're not replacing any of the ones that exist. You don't need to change how you publish your artifacts. And your users can always just go straight to GitHub or straight to Docker Hub or wherever people are fetching your artifacts today. That being said, if Scarf, if our gateway does go down, those specific links would break. However, our infrastructure is very globally distributed. it's very, so it's like multi-region on AWS, Kubernetes, and multiple AZs in each of those places. And so, typically the worst case of a Scarf outage is that users in one particular region may be impacted, and only until we fail that traffic over. So typically, outages at the gateway level are quite short. And they're very uncommon because this is infrastructure that we try to, update as little as possible since it has very, very high uptime requirements in general across our users. We do offer paid SLAs as well, but typically what we've kind of worked out with the CNCF has been enough for all the other projects that we work with. So hopefully that helps, but if anyone has other things there, feel free to raise your hand or interrupt me. I'll just keep going otherwise. What's the business value of leveraging this tracking data? Engineers are curious on its value. So a lot of the customers that we work with, and this I'm getting into a little bit about like how Scarf makes money as well, is that we work with companies that commercialize open source often. And so, our customers want to, they typically want to, understand which companies are relying on their open source, and they largely use this kind of data for sales and marketing purposes. So, as Arjun is showing here in the Scarf dashboard, like this company here, like in this case, Walmart is being tagged as an ongoing user of the software. So they've like rolled it out to production, basically, is what Scarf is saying. And that, might be interest to like a sales team that, might have an enterprise offering that you might be able to sell around the project. And so, for any, I think like, whether that's Microsoft or Amazon or elsewhere, if there are kind of commercial interests around the Notary project, that's where some of this data could potentially be useful to understand how different companies are leveraging Notary, adopting Notary, et cetera. In general, we tend to work with business side teams around, how they can kind of leverage this data and understand their user base and understand where commercial opportunities lie. That's the super high level version of it, but I'm happy to dive into any of that more specifically. Yeah, Todd?
Is that actually data available publicly, or is it only for authorized users who can access it?
Great question. So all the data that you collect in Scarf is private to you, the maintainers of Notary.
Okay, got it.
And that's just in general the case. All the data that you can if you want to share this data with your community, like a lot of the other projects will do that, but Scarf does not make any assumptions about how you want to leverage this. We look at this as this is your data and we are processing it on your behalf. And so even with like GDPR, we are a data processor with respect to GDPR as well. Any other questions on the business value side?
I was just going to actually jump in and provide a quick example. I know that a couple of the projects that were mentioned to kind of dig deeper into, and also one that Avi has also called out already, is one of them is Falco. So maybe worth just kind of looking deeper into this separately. And I can send this link over, but this whole repository, download.falco.org, has a lot of the different packages that Falco distributes. And what you'll actually find is that download.falco.org as a subdomain fully just redirects to the Scarf gateway. So basically any of the different packages that are being distributed here for any of the different architectures or any of the different versions that they have and they're distributing flow through Scarf. And as Avi mentioned, the open source project, in this case Falco, are the owners of that data. But Sysdig is a company that commercializes Falco open source, and many of the Falco maintainers also work at Sysdig. So in that respect, Sysdig is interested in being able to figure out if there's some type of business value to understand who the open source users of Falco are.
And so, in general, like our gateway is flexible enough where it can handle both Docker containers and, tarballs and, any kind of, essentially it's like flexible to be, sitting in front of arbitrary patterns of URLs. which I think leads us to this last question here. So if users install your CLI tool through package managers like Homebrew and Winget, et cetera, how can these be tracked by Scarf? I guess that might be, one question for you all is so in your Homebrew setup, do you maintain your own Homebrew tap, or are you in mainline Homebrew, or how does that work?
The Homebrew package is maintained in the upstream in the Homebrew community. We didn't have
Okay.
our own Homebrew package.
Got it. Okay. So I guess, I'll basically talk about the simple case first, which is so when it is your own tap, all you basically do is make sure that the formula that it pulls down the binary from is one that, is one of your Scarf links, essentially. When it comes to upstreaming, sometimes this depends a little bit in terms of how the upstream package gets built. So if the upstream is generally just grabbing one of the releases that you publish, you can just make sure that Homebrew is using one of those releases that are through your Scarf Gateway endpoint. If Homebrew is essentially like building stuff from source, it does tend to be a little bit harder to do. But what we've seen some folks do is they essentially will put some kind of telemetry into the build process so that when the build kicks off, it might send like a build success or a build failure to Scarf, and then Scarf can, grab the event and, do whatever kind of analytics you want. In general, though, this is the kind of thing that there's a lot of ways to go about this, but it all generally tends to get back to an artifact gets downloaded somewhere in that process, and you make sure that that endpoint that it goes to is kind of the official, the official place, and you make the official thing something that you're tracking. Questions about that? Okay.
I'm still wondering how can we implement the telemetry for download for the metrics from Homebrew and Winget and some other package managers. If there are any guidance or documentation for this part, feel free to share us after the meeting.
Yeah, we can send some links of like other Homebrew formula and this kind of thing. Arjun's also dropping a link on just how you do custom telemetry with Scarf. And kind of the long and short of it is that, in the same way as our gateway can sit in front of an artifact, you can also just send events to it as well. And those events will be basically tied to a Scarf package, and then we kind of just aggregate all these metrics together. Yeah, I guess I'm not as familiar with Winget in particular, but I think typically what we see is that it's either one of two things. It's either some kind of a, Scarf gateway sits in front of the overall artifact that is being fetched by the package manager at build time, um, or like a post install or a post build hook is added to at the package level, and that kind of reports, the version that got installed or something to us, and then we aggregate that metric as well. Between those two paths, this is something that we can help you work with and decide. Like, I don't know, the set of your distributions closely enough to kind of make a recommendation right here, but, we will work with you to figure it out. In general, we've kind of helped. Typically what we do with CNCF projects is just kind of work with you to figure it out.
Yeah, I guess a really high level comment there is just that with all the open source projects we work with in the CNCF and outside of it, they have a variety of different distribution methods, and basically one way or another, we can help you figure out who's using it and who's downloading it. So I guess one thing I want to do is, we can make sure we send over some of the documentation around some of the usage, and then we can also send over some more examples of the other CNCF projects. Definitely, if people are interested in learning more about Falco, I think Feynman, you had mentioned Dapper as well. There's a lot of other CNCF projects actually that are using Scarf as well. So we can send over more examples of those too.
Yeah, but in terms of like some of the bigger projects, just to kind of list a couple so folks know. So like Linkerd uses Scarf for all of their containers. So they've made the they have their own URL that they're using now. So cr.l5d.io is like the domain they choose to use with Scarf. And then all those containers that you can download basically flow through Scarf. So they have metrics on those. Yeah, for Dapper, we have a tracking pixel in all their docs. So they are using that to kind of understand how their different docs are being used and which features are being read about the most and kind of where the community is and these kinds of things. Yeah, FluentBit did a similar thing where they have cr.fluentbit.io that they distribute all of their containers through. So there's kind of like a branding element too, if you want to kind of brand the endpoint for your project. You can set that up with Scarf, and basically you just CNAME that domain to us, and then we use Let's Encrypt to issue SSL certificates and do all the SSL termination and do all that stuff. We just kind of take care of it for you. What others? I'm trying to think. Sorry?
Telepresence.
Yeah, telepresence, or sorry, I guess emissary egress, I guess is the yeah, CNCF one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of others. I don't know if
Litmus Chaos is using us in
Litmus
front of chart.
Chaos. Is Kraken D CNCF or is that Linux Foundation?
They're
I don't
not,
remember.
but Flight is, yeah, it's also
Oh
Linux
yeah,
Foundation.
yeah, Flight as well. They're LF.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I think overall, this is the kind of thing where, like, from graduated to sandbox is something that kind of, our work with the CNCF has, yeah, basically just made this so that any project can use Scarf. I guess we were asked about kind of our pricing and how that tends to work. And this is all free to use for CNCF projects. In terms of what we offer to all projects is all the maintainers can use this. So there's no like seat license like we do for our customers. You get unlimited data retention. So we'll keep your data around indefinitely for as long as you want to use it. And you get basically all of the non-commercial data entirely for free as a part of our partnership with the CNCF. And then we basically charge once you want access to the company data. That's where Scarf charges. And, that's where our business tends to be when folks can commercialize with this data. So generally with a lot of the CNCF projects that we are working with, like there's just a lot that is done and, no one's being charged anything because this is just kind of part of our work with the foundation.
Is the company data charged by person, by the members?
Good question. So so for the commercial data, that is where we charge, and basically how we charge is just on a consumption scale. So say there's 50,000 companies that are using Notary. You'd be able to tell us, hey, Scarf, we want to buy up to 5,000 of these companies a month, and we basically charge based on that number. So our customers basically have kind of stable, predictable pricing that doesn't change based on your traffic. It's just based on how many companies you want to have surfaced and how many you think that you can like leverage effectively. So that basically ensures that you have complete pricing transparency from us, and it's not dependent on anything that you don't control directly. And otherwise, we basically will give 3 companies that you can see 3 companies for free just to kind of get a sense of what that does. But in general, that's Scarf's business model, is that we charge and make money off of the company data. But again, in the CNCF, it's something that we only work with the maintainers of the project to do that. So it's not something that like gets kind of resold separately of the project maintainers.
Okay. Any questions from the Notary project side? Great. I think Arjun and Avi, I think you answered our question well. We may need to take some time to discuss and make the decision for adopting Scarf later. We'll let you know what's the next step.
Sure.
Sounds good.
Finally, one question for you, I guess, is was there anything that was not covered on our side that you think that we should cover, just given that you've had some more context, I guess?
I think you both covered all of the points and questions that we asked last time. If there are still further questions, we can reach out to you in the Slack channel.
Definitely. Cool.
Sure.
Yeah, we're available for
Sure.
any questions that come up, and yeah, we're happy. Well, if this is something that you want to move forward with, we're happy to kind of help figure out the right setup, so you all can start tracking this.
Yeah, actually, I guess
Thank you for your time, everybody.
oh, I
Oh,
was going to say one last.
I got to drop, I guess,
no worries.
but yeah, Arjun, if you have more, feel free. Thanks,
Yeah,
everyone.
I just have one more thing to add, which was that with all these CNCF projects that we work with, sometimes they've asked us to help them work on some of the community messaging whenever they introduce something like this, because sometimes they are interested in kind of providing some additional transparency around what they're actually doing and why they're doing it. So just so you know, that's something that we've done a lot of before, and we are quite comfortable with being able to help frame some of that writing and messaging. And we can also provide some examples of how people have done that in the past. So if that's something that is on your mind, and once you guys discuss internally and you decide that if you decide that this is something you want to move forward with, then definitely happy to help with that part as well.
Okay. Thanks, Arjun.
Cool. Well, thank you. It was nice to meet everybody. And yeah, thanks for setting this up, Feynman.
Yeah, thanks for the
Thank
time.
you. Mhm.
Cool. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you.
Okay, let me reshare my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. The next topic is about the status update for our ongoing security audit. So based on the information that shared by the audit team yesterday, so they basically complete, I think, the feature review on timestamping and CIL as well. And they are now writing the audit reports. They also mentioned that they reported one security advisory issue under the notation Go repository. It's a low priority issue. I think currently Junjie is working on that. So I think maybe for Pradesh, you can also take a look on that security advisory on the Notation Go repository. They did mention some other issue, I think, but those issues could be more related to some informative issues, and they will include it in the reports. With that, they also mentioned that the report could be available by end of this week or early next week. So that means before end of this month, we will have the security audit report. I think the next step for us is to work with the audit team on the report to triage those issues, and then we will, based on the scope, we aligned with the security audit team. We will plan notation 1.3.0 RC.2 to address all the issues that we aligned. So that also means that notation 1.3.0 RC2 will include all the issues and bug fixes for 1.3.0. And then after that, we will give 1 week to see whether any other critical issue identified during that week. If not, we will cut the notation 1.3 official release. So the estimated time could be middle or end of November for notation 1.3. So any comments, feedback? Cool. Yeah, I think Pradesh, please take a look at that security advisory under notation Go repository. Feel free to share your comments and feedback.
Will do. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Pradesh. Okay. If no other comments, let's move to the last topic. Okay. So the last topic is about the notation V2 plan. So I created an issue on the notation repository, and let me switch to that issue, and let me refresh it. Yeah. So we did some discussion around notation V2 planning weeks ago around 1.3 planning, and I summarized this issue for the proposal for the notation V2 plan, and currently I list two milestone that and with the scopes. I'm not sure whether Pritesh, Vani, or other maintenance already saw this issue, so I can do a quick introduction. So I planned two milestone for notation V2. The first one will be the notation V2.0.0, and the scope for this release is we will update the default behavior for the according to the OCI 1.1 specification and using referrals API as the default for notation sign command. And this is one thing, and also this will break the previous default behavior. So this is also one of the reasons that we need to uplift the notation version from V1 to V2. And also we would like to, in this release, we would like to complete the work related to sign and verify arbitrary data. We also call it blob sign, this feature. So previously, I think Pritesh, one in your team, is working on this feature and complete, I think, the majority of the notation libraries work, but for the notation CLI work, it is not completed. So we would like to discuss how we can proceed on this feature and complete it for V2.0.0. And also another issue listed here is actually we found later that from the cncf, I think from Open SSF point of view, they have a different guidelines on the signature file name. And this also we need to discuss because currently for the blob sign, our proposal for the signature file is a different. So that could be a problem that this signature file cannot be automatically collected and analyzed by some other tools. So that we need to discuss what we should change on the current blob sign specification. But those issues are, I think, are related to blob sign. This feature we can discuss it together. So for the V2.0.0, the major feature is, as I said, blob sign and also changing the default behavior of a notation sign command for using the referrals API. The next milestone is one V2.1.0, and the major feature included in this milestone, one of them is the support more wildcards for the trust policy. So currently we only support the repository URLs for the trust policy scope, but we have users and customers asking that to support more values, for example, more patterns, for example, on the registry level, so that they do not need to list all the repository, and also some namespace level related to the trust policy scope. I think for this one, we also needed to update our specification, and we needed to have a discussion around it. Another, I would say, big feature for V2.1 is attestations. So attestations has been discussed for quite a few times, and also back to 2024 last year, we also have in total community engaged with us since then, talking about the collaboration with in total community on the attestations, especially related to the signature envelope, and also some other issues that brought up during that time. So I created an issue just yesterday to give introduction on the attestations, and also some problems we already touched with in total community, and maybe even there could be some others that pretend or meaning the you guys are aware of it. So feel free to check this issue and comment. And in this issue, I also request that from Notary project point of view, we should also identify the scenarios for the attestations across the container secure supply chain, and from end-to-end point of view. And also, I think we definitely need specifications related to attestation format, how to store attestations in OCI compliant registries, and also the creation and verification workflow for attestations. So I listed some key points there, and I think we need to later on have a proposal for discussion, and also specification also needed to be updated. And after that, we will do the referencing implementation. Yeah. So that's the basic idea for the notation V2 plan that we can see from now on. And I split those work items into 2 milestones. And also I put a target date there. It is a tentative target date. We can review it over time. Yeah, so any feedback, comments? Ritesh,
this-
Vani? Yeah. Sorry, Femin, please.
Yeah, I'm wondering, is this the comprehensive list for our next 2 milestones? I believe there are some small or middle size of issues and enhancements reported by users and our maintainers.
Yeah. So currently I listed the key features that we want to bring in these 2 milestones, which will benefit all the customers. There are other small issues asked that are not addressed by this issue, but we can do that on the milestone charge. We can put those issues under each milestone, but of course we need to also considering our resource over time. Yeah.
Yeah, I see the target date is March 2025. So in terms of resourcing for this year, I think we have other priorities. So we'll not be able to get to the development work, but support the PRs for this year. Next year, probably in January, we can revisit that, but not for this year.
Thanks for sharing this information. So for the V2, currently it is put on the target date is in March next year. One of the reasons is that we needed to first complete the ongoing 1.3 release, I think around the end of November. Then we will have in December, we will have, I think later December will be some public holidays in the East world. So that's the reason we're considering the notation V2 next year. And also we need to also do some specification update related to block sign. And of course, as Wani, you mentioned, that we also need to check the resourcing issues by that time. So yeah, so one question. So for the block sign, so previously this feature is owned by your team or Wani and Pritesh. So I'm trying to discuss, as you mentioned, there are resourcing issues this year, but we needed to start the work as soon as possible. So do you have any suggestions or preference on this?
Pritesh, if anybody picks up for development and if they have any questions, we should be available to help them, right? To unblock.
Yeah, sorry, I was away. Can you please repeat the question?
Yeah, the question is for the block sign implementation. Yeah.
Hmm.
And related to the resourcing, whether from your side you can continue pick up this feature and complete the implementation.
I don't think we can do the implementation work,
Right.
but I can the
Pritesh, what
PR.
I was trying to tell is if anybody picks it up for the development, should we be able to help them to unblock, if not
Yeah,
the implementation itself, right? So that
yeah.
was the plan. Yeah.
I can, or I, me or Rakesh can be able to, should be able to answer questions and review PRs.
Okay. Yeah. So that means probably we from our side we will find the resource, try to find the resource from our side to continue the implementation work, and from your side, Pritesh or Rakesh, you can provide the support on the PR reviewing and some discussions, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
One thing we can do is whoever is doing the implementation, we can dedicate next week Monday meeting. If they have any open questions before any implementation, we can focus that in this meeting next week.
Okay, I think if that's the case, we will. I think we will firstly complete the work on 1.3, right? And then we will discuss further on this feature. And also from Pritesh, Rakesh, please. I'm not sure whether those were tracked somewhere. Please maybe comment in this issue or in the sign verify arbitrary data that the issue about what's the work left, and I think from your side, what's the left work you're thinking we needed to complete? Maybe just a short summary, then we can
Yep.
take a
I
look.
can create some task of that issue and then note down all the work which we have completed and what's pending. Yeah.
Yeah, basically a short summary on the status and a kind of handover, right? Yeah.
We'll do that.
Okay, thanks. We only have 4 minutes. Another thing is related to attestations. I think attestations will need some time for documentation. I mean, the specification work and also proposals. And also before that, we may need to have a POC. I would like to suggest maybe Wani, Pritesh, or even Mingling from your side can maybe can start it early to share your insights, comments on the attestation issues so that we can trigger the discussion early as soon as possible, because it's not it's not a simple feature. It's I think it's epic. So it's better that we can discuss attestations related issues, scenarios as early as possible. So yeah, so I'm not sure whether Pritesh, you would like to bring this to Binlian to have a discussion with Binlian, and also you feel free to comment on that issue I created here, so that you can add your comments or insights under this issue so that we can start earlier.
When you say insights and comments, you mean requirements or ideas how it should be done?
Yeah, I think let me open this issue. I think anything related to attestations, because it has been discussed quite some time. I know some maybe from your side or meaning already have some comments. So I think it will not limited to any technical or any scenarios. I think it's a broad discussion covering scenarios or problems that from your side you want to address, and also format and how to storage. I think anything that you already have some solid consideration, and so feel free to add to this issue.
I can request Milind to look into it as well, while Pritesh is also handing over the club signing, right? Pritesh, you're okay with that? Like the first step?
Yeah, works for me.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, because otherwise Pritesh will have everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can ask Milind to join one of the meetings, or I can ask Milind to also comment on, look at the issue and provide his feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think let's start with the offline discussion comments first, then comes to a time. I can prepare some document so that we can review as an initial draft for the attestation work. Then we will see how we can break down this work. Yeah.
You have this link in the agenda, right, T? You have
Yeah,
this
let
link.
me copy, paste here.
Mm.
Yeah, in the
Okay.
chat.
Let us work on line. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's basic from my side. Anything else we want to discuss around this plan? Yeah. If no, we can end this meeting. Thanks, everyone. Have a stay. Bye.
Thank
Have
you,
a
folks.
great day.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.